The small transport ship landed at Galactic Trade Station 7 with a soft hum. Yuna stood near the exit door, her hands shaking slightly. She looked down at her claws and tried to make them stop trembling. It did not work. She was not supposed to be here. Her mother, the respected Dragonkin diplomat Hana, was supposed to handle these negotiations. But 3 days ago, her mother had collapsed from fever. The illness was not dangerous, but it was enough to keep her in bed for at least 2 weeks. "You must go in my place," her mother had said, her voice weak but firm. "The negotiations cannot wait. The Galactic Council will not postpone them." Yuna had wanted to refuse. She was only 23 years old in human counting. She had finished her diplomatic training just 6 months ago. She had never led a real negotiation before, but she could not say no to her mother. She could never say no to her mother. The door opened, and Yuna stepped out into the station. The air was cool and smelled like metal and recycled oxygen. Beings from many different worlds walked through the wide corridors. She saw tall, thin creatures with blue skin. She saw short, round beings covered in fur. She saw humans too, walking with confidence like they owned the place. Yuna pulled her official robe tighter around her shoulders. The fabric was dark green with gold patterns, the traditional colors of Dragonkin diplomats. It had belonged to her grandmother once. Now it felt too big on her small frame. She checked the time on her personal device. The negotiations would begin in 3 hours. She had time to find her quarters and prepare. But first, she needed to report to the station's diplomatic office. As she walked, she noticed a large display screen on the wall. It showed the current date in many different calendar systems. Yuna's eyes found the Dragonkin calendar automatically. Her heart sank when she saw the date. Today was the 15th day of the Moon of Remembrance. Of all the days in the year, it had to be this one. Yuna forced herself to look away from the screen and keep walking. She could not think about that now. She had a job to do. Her mother was counting on her. Her people were counting on her. The diplomatic office was on the upper level of the station. Yuna took an elevator and tried to calm her breathing. When the doors opened, she saw a wide room with many desks and screens. Different species worked together, reviewing documents and speaking in various languages. A human man stood near the entrance, looking at a tablet in his hands. He was tall, with black hair and kind eyes. He wore a simple dark suit, the standard uniform for human diplomats. When he saw Yuna, he smiled and walked toward her. "You must be the representative from the Dragonkin Commonwealth," he said in a friendly voice. "I am Junho, the human ambassador assigned to assist with today's negotiations. Welcome to Station 7. Yuna bowed her head in the traditional Dragonkin greeting. "I am Yuna. I am here in place of my mother, Diplomat Hana. She sends her apologies for not being able to attend." Junho's eyebrows rose slightly. "Diplomat Hana is not coming? I have heard many good things about her. I hope she is well." "She is ill, but she will recover," Yuna said. "I will do my best to represent our people in her absence." Junho nodded with understanding. "I am sure you will do well. Please, let me show you to the conference room. We can review the agenda before the other delegates arrive." They walked together through the corridors. Yuna noticed that Junho moved at a slower pace to match her shorter steps. It was a small kindness, but she appreciated it. "Is this your first time at Station 7? Junho asked. "Yes," Yuna admitted. "I have only been to smaller stations before. This one is much bigger. It can be overwhelming at first," Junho agreed. "But you will get used to it. The layout is actually quite simple. Once you learn it." They passed another calendar display. Yuna's eyes moved to it without her permission. The Dragonkin date was there again, glowing in soft blue letters. 15th day of the Moon of Remembrance. Junho noticed her looking. "Is something wrong?" Yuna quickly shook her head. "No, nothing is wrong. I was just checking the time." She could tell that Junho did not believe her, but he was polite enough not to push further. They continued walking in silence for a moment. The conference room was large and round, with a big table in the center. Chairs of different sizes and shapes surrounded the table, designed to fit the bodies of various species. Large windows showed the stars outside, beautiful and endless. "Please, sit anywhere you like," Junho said. "Can I get you something to drink? We have water, tea, and several other options." "Tea would be nice," Yuna said. "Thank you." Junho walked to a small machine in the corner and prepared 2 cups of tea. Yuna sat down in one of the chairs and looked around the room. This was where she would have to face the other delegates. This was where she would have to speak for her entire people. Her hands started shaking again. Junho returned with the tea and sat down across from her. He placed 1 cup in front of her and held the other in his hands. "I noticed your claws trembling," he said gently. "Please do not take offense. I only mention it because I want you to know that being nervous is normal. Even experienced diplomats feel nervous before important negotiations." Yuna looked down at her hands. Her claws were indeed trembling slightly against the table surface. She felt embarrassed that the human had noticed. "I am sorry," she said. "I am not as experienced as my mother. I did not expect to be here today." "There is no need to apologize," Junho said. "You are young, and this is a big responsibility. But I have read about the dragonkin diplomatic tradition. Your people have been skilled negotiators for thousands of years. That skill is in your blood." Yuna managed a small smile. "You are very kind." "I am just being honest," Junho replied. "Now shall we look at the agenda?" For the next 2 hours, they reviewed the documents together. The negotiations involved trade agreements between 5 different species. The issues were complex, involving shipping routes, resource sharing, and border disputes. Yuna tried to focus on the information, but her mind kept drifting. She kept thinking about the date. She kept thinking about what it meant. She kept thinking about why she should be home today, not here. Several times, Junho had to repeat his questions because she was not paying attention. Each time, she apologized and tried harder to concentrate, but her eyes kept moving to the clock on the wall, watching the hours pass. Junho noticed. He noticed everything, but he said nothing about it. He just kept explaining the details of the negotiation with patience and kindness. When the other delegates finally began to arrive, Yuna felt her heart beat faster. It was time to begin. She stood up and straightened her grandmother's robe on her shoulders. She took a deep breath and prepared to face whatever came next. The 15th day of the Moon of Remembrance had only just begun. The conference room filled with delegates from 5 different species. Each group took their seats around the large round table. The air became heavy with tension as old rivals faced each other across the polished surface. Yuna sat in her assigned seat, her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She tried to look calm and confident, but inside, her stomach was tight with worry. Beside her, Junho gave her a small nod of encouragement. The first to speak was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His name was something Yuna could not pronounce, so she thought of him simply as the Gray Delegate. He represented the mining colonies of the Outer Rim. "Let us begin," the Gray Delegate said in a cold voice. "We have wasted enough time already. The shipping routes through Sector 9 must be opened immediately. Our supplies are running low. Our supplies are running low." A delegate from another species, a being covered in thick brown fur, slammed his paw on the table. "Sector 9 is too close to our territory. We will not allow foreign ships to pass through without proper inspection." "Your inspections take weeks," the Gray Delegate replied angrily. "Our people will starve before your inspectors finish their paperwork." Yuna watched the argument grow louder. This was not going well. She looked at Junho, hoping for guidance, but he only watched with a neutral expression. She understood then that he could not help her directly. She had to handle this herself. She stood up from her chair. The movement caught everyone's attention, and the room became quiet. All eyes turned to her. "Perhaps," Yuna said, her voice shaking slightly. "Perhaps we can find a middle way. What if the inspections were done at the border of Sector 9 instead of inside the territory? This would save time and still provide security." The furry delegate looked at her with small, suspicious eyes. "And who are you?" "I was expecting Diplomat Hana. I am her daughter, Yuna. I speak with her authority today." "A child," the furry delegate said with contempt. "They send a child to discuss matters of life and death." Yuna felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. But before she could respond, Junho stood up beside her. "Delegate Yuna is a fully trained diplomat of the Dragonkin Commonwealth," Junho said firmly. "Her age does not reduce her authority or her skill. I suggest we treat all delegates at this table with equal respect." The furry delegate made a low growling sound but said nothing more. Yuna looked at Junho with gratitude. He gave her a brief smile and sat back down. The negotiations continued for hours. Every issue became an argument. Every suggestion met with resistance. Yuna spoke when she could, offering solutions and asking questions. Some of her ideas were accepted, but many were rejected. Throughout the long meeting, Yuna struggled to keep her focus. Her eyes kept moving to the clock on the wall. Time was passing. The 15th day of the Moon of Remembrance was slipping away. Minute by minute, at one point, she made a mistake. She confused two different trade agreements and suggested terms that contradicted each other. The gray delegate pointed out her error with cruel satisfaction. "It seems the Dragon Kin have sent us someone who does not even know the basic facts," he said. "Perhaps we should pause these negotiations until a more qualified representative can attend." Yuna's cheeks burned with shame. She opened her mouth to apologize, but Junho spoke first. "There was a translation error in the documents we received," Junho said smoothly. "I noticed it earlier but forgot to mention it. The confusion is understandable. Let me clarify the correct terms for everyone." He stood up and explained the two agreements clearly, making it sound like the mistake was in the paperwork, not in Yuna's knowledge. The other delegates accepted his explanation and moved on. Yuna looked at Junho with wonder. He had lied for her. He had protected her from embarrassment in front of all these powerful beings. She did not understand why a human she had just met would do such a thing. The meeting took a short break at midday. Yuna walked to the window and stared out at the stars. Her reflection looked back at her from the glass. She looked tired and sad. Junho appeared beside her with 2 cups of water. He offered one to her, and she accepted it quietly. "You are doing better than you think," Junho said. "Negotiations like this are never easy. Even experienced diplomats struggle." "I made a foolish mistake," Yuna said. "You should not have covered for me." "Everyone makes mistakes," Junho replied. "What matters is how we continue afterward. You did not give up. You kept trying. That is what makes a good diplomat." Yuna took a sip of water. It was cold and helped calm her throat. "Why are you helping me so much? We only met today." Junho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I was young, I made many mistakes during my first negotiations. Another diplomat, from a species very different from humans, helped me without asking for anything in return. He told me that the galaxy becomes a better place when we support each other. I have never forgotten his words." "I have never forgotten his words." Yuna nodded slowly. "Your people have a kind heart. Some of us try," Junho said with a small smile. "Now, I noticed you keep looking at the clock. Is there somewhere you need to be?" Yuna's hand tightened around her cup. "No. There is nowhere I need to be. I am watching the time. That is all." She could feel Junho's eyes on her, curious and concerned, but she could not tell him the truth. She could not explain why this date was so important. It was too personal, too painful. The break ended, and the negotiations resumed. The afternoon was even harder than the morning. The delegates argued about border patrols, tax rates, and emergency protocols. Every point became a battle. Yuna felt exhausted. Her head hurt from concentrating so hard. Her heart hurt from thinking about what she was missing back home. On this day, her mother always lit candles and sang the old songs. On this day, all Dragonkin remembered those who were lost. But Yuna was here, trapped in this room, unable to honor her ancestors properly. As the sun set outside the station windows, the negotiations finally reached a difficult point. The gray delegate demanded something impossible. The furry delegate threatened to walk out. The other delegates started shouting at each other. Una stood up again, her voice louder this time. Enough! The room fell silent. Everyone stared at her. We have been arguing for hours, Una said. We have made progress on some issues, but not on others. Perhaps we should pause for today and continue tomorrow with fresh minds. We do not have time to pause, the gray delegate said. Every day of delay costs lives. And every decision made in anger could cost even more lives, Una replied. We are all tired. We are all frustrated. If we continue like this, we will make mistakes that we cannot take back. The delegates looked at each other. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to nod. The Dragonkin representative speaks wisdom, said a quiet delegate who had barely talked all day. Let us rest and return tomorrow. O Clam, O Leftkin, the meeting ended. The delegates left the room one by one, some still grumbling about the delay. Una stayed by the window, watching them go. When the room was empty except for her and Junho, she finally allowed herself to breathe. You did well, Junho said. You stopped a disaster from happening. Una shook her head. I only delayed it. Tomorrow, they will start fighting again. Perhaps. But perhaps tomorrow they will be calmer. You gave everyone time to think. Junho paused. Including yourself. Una looked at him. His eyes were gentle and full of questions. Questions he was too polite to ask. Thank you for your help today, Una said softly. I could not have survived without you. You are stronger than you know, Junho said. Now, go rest. You have earned it. Una walked toward the door, but she did not go to her quarters. She went to the observation deck, where she could see the stars more clearly. She needed to be alone with her thoughts. She needed to remember. The 15th day was almost over, and she had not done anything to honor those who died. Her grandmother's face appeared in her mind, strong and proud, kind and brave, gone forever because of what she did for others. A single tear rolled down Una's cheek as she watched the stars. Behind her, unseen, Junho stood in the shadows. He had followed her quietly, worried about her strange behavior. He watched her cry alone by the window, and he decided that he needed to find out what was really happening. Junho could not sleep that night. He lay in his bed in the station's human quarters, staring at the ceiling. His mind kept returning to Una. The way she looked at the calendar. The way she watched the clock. The way she cried alone by the window. Something was wrong. Something important. And he needed to understand what it was. He got out of bed and walked to his desk. His computer terminal glowed softly in the dark room. He sat down and opened the Galactic Cultural Archive. This database contained information about traditions and customs from every known species. He typed in his search, Dragonkin Calendar, 15th Day, Moon of Remembrance. The results appeared on his screen. He began to read. The Moon of Remembrance was a sacred month for the Dragonkin people. During this time, they honored ancestors who had passed away. They lit candles, sang traditional songs, and visited memorial sites. It was a quiet, personal time for families. But the 15th day was different. Junho read on, his eyes growing wider with each sentence. The 15th day of the Moon of Remembrance was called the Day of Sacrifice. On this day, Dragonkin remembered those who had given their lives to protect others. It was the most important memorial day in their calendar. The tradition began over 200 years ago, during the Great Void War. Junho felt his heart beat faster. He knew about the Great Void War. Every human learned about it in school. It was one of the darkest times in galactic history. A hostile force had swept through the galaxy, destroying everything in its path. Many species had lost their home worlds. Millions had died. He searched for more specific information about the Dragonkin during that war. What he found made his breath catch in his throat. During the Great Void War, the Dragonkin had controlled a region of space called the Golden Path. It was a series of safe routes through dangerous territory. When the war reached its worst point, Millions of refugees from other species had fled through the Golden Path to escape destruction. The Dragonkin had protected those refugees with their own lives. Human refugees were among them. Junho read the historical records carefully. During the final months of the war, a massive enemy fleet had tried to cut off the Golden Path. If they had succeeded, millions of refugees would have been trapped and killed. The Dragonkin military was too weak to stop the entire enemy fleet, so they made a terrible choice. Dragonkin mothers, grandmothers, and elders volunteered to pilot ships directly into the enemy formation. They became living shields, sacrificing themselves to create openings for the refugees to escape. Over 50,000 Dragonkin died that day. Among the refugees they saved were nearly 2 million humans. Junho stared at the screen, unable to move. He had never known this history. His teachers had told him that humans survived the Great Void War through luck and determination. No one had mentioned that Dragonkin mothers had died so that human children could live. He searched for more details. He found lists of names. Lists of the Dragonkin who had sacrificed themselves. Lists of the refugee ships that escaped because of their courage. Then he found something that made his hands shake. A record of a specific rescue mission. A Dragonkin elder named Suri had piloted her ship into the heart of the enemy fleet. She had drawn enemy fire for 17 minutes, allowing 6 refugee transports to escape. Those transports carried 12,000 people. 9,000 of them were human. Elder Suri's ship had been destroyed. She had died instantly. Junho looked at the family records attached to Suri's memorial page. She had left behind one daughter, Hana. That daughter had later become a diplomat. Hana was Yuna's mother. Suri was Yuna's grandmother. Junho pushed back from his desk. His heart was pounding. Everything made sense now. Yuna's sadness. Her distraction. Her tears by the window. She was supposed to be home today, honoring her grandmother's sacrifice. Instead, she was here, alone, working to serve her people while carrying this heavy weight in her heart. And she was wearing her grandmother's robe. Junho remembered seeing the old-fashioned patterns on Yuna's diplomatic clothing. He had thought it was a family tradition. Now he understood. Yuna was wearing the robe of a hero, the robe of a woman who had died saving human lives. He stood up and walked to his window. The stars outside looked different now. He used to see them as beautiful and peaceful. Now he saw them as markers of sacrifice. Somewhere out there, 200 years ago, a Dragonkin grandmother had flown into fire so that his ancestors could survive. He might exist because of Suri's choice. His parents, his grandparents, everyone he had ever known, might be alive because a Dragonkin elder had decided that human lives were worth dying for. Junho felt tears form in his eyes. He was not a man who cried easily. But this truth hit him deep in his chest. It hurt in a way he had never experienced before. Why did no one know about this? He searched the human history databases. He found brief mentions of Dragonkin assistance during the Great Void War, but the details were missing. The scale of the sacrifice was not recorded. The names of the mothers who died were not remembered. How could humans have forgotten something so important? Junho made a decision. He could not change the past. He could not bring back the Dragonkin who had died. But he could do something now. He could honor them. He could honor Yuna. He spent the rest of the night researching Dragonkin memorial traditions. He learned about the white star flowers that they placed on memorial sites. He learned about the words they spoke to thank the dead. He learned about the bow of deep respect that they gave to the families of those who sacrificed themselves. By the time the station's lights brightened to simulate morning, Junho had a plan. The negotiations would resume in a few hours. Before they began, he would find a way to honor Yuna's grandmother. He would show Yuna that humans had not forgotten. Even if most humans had never known, this human would remember. He cleaned himself up and put on his best uniform. He left his quarters and went searching for something specific. The station had a small garden area where plants from many different worlds were grown. It was meant to provide comfort to travelers who missed their home planets. Junho hoped to find what he needed there. He walked through rows of strange and beautiful plants. Colors he had never seen before surrounded him. Scents, both sweet and sharp, filled the air. He searched carefully, reading the labels on each plant. Finally, he found them. White star flowers from the dragonkin homeworld. They were small and delicate, with petals that seemed to glow softly in the artificial light. According to the label, they only bloomed once a year, during the moon of remembrance. They were blooming now. Junho asked the garden keeper if he could take a few flowers. The keeper, a kind old woman from a species Junho did not recognize, smiled and agreed. She helped him cut a small bunch of the flowers and wrap them carefully. "These flowers are special," the old keeper said. "They carry the spirits of the dead. That is what the dragonkin believe." "Oh, I know," Junho said. "That is why I need them." He carried the flowers back toward the conference room. His heart was full of emotion. He was nervous. He was sad. He was determined. Today, he would do something that humans should have done 200 years ago. Today, he would say thank you. As he walked, he passed a calendar display on the wall. The dragonkin date showed the 16th day of the moon of remembrance. The day of sacrifice had ended, but it was not too late. In his heart, Junho knew it was never too late to honor those who gave everything. He held the white starflowers close to his chest and continued walking. Yuna was already in the conference room when he arrived. She looked tired. Her golden eyes were red from crying. But she stood tall in her grandmother's robe, ready to face another day of difficult negotiations. She did not notice the flowers in Junho's hands. Not yet. The other delegates began to arrive. The room filled with tension and noise. Everyone was preparing for another day of arguments. But Junho had other plans. He waited patiently for the right moment. When all the delegates were seated and the room became quiet for the opening statements, Junho stood up. "Before we begin," he said in a clear voice, "I wish to address an important matter." Everyone looked at him with surprise. This was not part of the agenda. Yuna stared at him with confusion in her eyes. Junho took a deep breath and began to speak. The conference room fell completely silent. Every delegate stopped what they were doing and turned to look at Junho. Some looked annoyed at the interruption. Others looked curious about what the human ambassador had to say. Yuna watched him with wide eyes. She did not understand what was happening. Why was Junho standing up? Why was he holding something behind his back? "Before we continue with today's negotiations," Junho said, his voice steady and strong, "I must speak about something that happened over 200 years ago. Something that most people in this room have forgotten. Something that humans should never have forgotten." The gray delegate made an impatient sound. "What does ancient history have to do with our trade agreements?" "Everything," Junho replied. "Because history teaches us who our true friends are." He looked directly at Yuna. She felt her heart begin to beat faster. Something in his eyes made her feel both scared and hopeful at the same time. "Yesterday was the 15th day of the moon of remembrance," Junho continued. "For the dragonkin people, this is the day of sacrifice. It is the day when they honor those who gave their lives to protect others." Yuna felt her throat tighten. How did he know? She had not told anyone about the significance of the date. 200 years ago, during the Great Void War, the dragonkin people made a choice that changed the fate of the galaxy, Junho said. He began to walk around the table, moving closer to Yuna. When millions of refugees were trapped and facing death, the dragonkin opened the golden path. They allowed strangers from other species to pass through their territory to safety. The delegates listened quietly. Some of them remembered learning about this history. Others had never heard of it before. But opening the path was not enough. Junho continued. The enemy fleet came to close the path forever. The dragonkin military was not strong enough to stop them. So the dragonkin people did something incredible, something that should never be forgotten. He stopped walking. He was now standing directly in front of Yuna. She looked up at him with tears forming in her eyes. Over 50,000 dragonkin mothers, grandmothers, and elders volunteered to sacrifice themselves. They flew their ships directly into the enemy fleet. They became shields of living fire. They died so that millions of refugees could escape. The room was completely silent now. Even the gray delegate, who had been so impatient, was listening with respect. Among those refugees were nearly 2 million humans, Junho said, his voice cracked slightly with emotion. My ancestors might have been among them. I might exist today because a dragonkin grandmother decided that my people were worth dying for. Yuna could not hold back her tears anymore. They streamed down her face as she listened to Junho speak the words she had never heard from any human before. Junho brought his hands from behind his back. He was holding the white star flowers he had collected from the station garden. Their petals glowed softly, perfect and beautiful. I learned that one of those brave souls was named Suri, Junho said gently. She was an elder who flew her ship into the heart of the enemy fleet. She saved 12,000 lives, including 9,000 humans. She died instantly, giving everything she had so that strangers could live. Yuna let out a small sob. Grandmother. He was talking about her grandmother. Suri was the grandmother of Delegate Yuna, who sits before us today, Junho announced to the room. Yesterday, on the day of sacrifice, Yuna should have been home with her family, honoring her grandmother's memory. Instead, she came here. She put her duty to her people above her personal grief. She served us all while carrying a pain that none of us understood. Junho lowered himself to one knee before Yuna. He bowed his head deeply and held out the white star flowers with both hands. On behalf of humanity, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I offer these flowers in memory of Elder Suri and all the dragonkin who sacrificed themselves for us. We owe you our existence. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid. But we can start by saying two simple words that we should have said 200 years ago. He looked up at Yuna with tears in his own eyes. Thank you. Yuna could not breathe. She could not think. She could only feel. Waves of emotion crashed through her body. Grief for her grandmother. Shock that this human knew her story. Joy that someone finally understood. Relief that she did not have to carry this weight alone. She took the flowers from Junho's hands with trembling claws. The petals felt cool and soft against her scales. She brought them close to her chest and held them like they were the most precious things in the universe. My grandmother, she whispered. You know about my grandmother. I know, Junho said softly. And I am so deeply sorry that it took us this long to acknowledge what she did. What all of them did. The other delegates watched in stunned silence. The furry delegate who had called Yuna a child yesterday wiped his eyes with his paw. The gray delegate sat very still, his usual coldness replaced by something that looked like shame. Junho stood up slowly. He faced the room and spoke again. I ask all the delegates here today to join me in a moment of silence. Let us honor the dragonkin who died during the Great Void War. Let us remember that we are not alone in this galaxy. We are connected by bonds of sacrifice and gratitude that stretch across centuries. One by one, the delegates stood. Even those who had been fighting and arguing just yesterday rose to their feet. They bowed their heads and closed their eyes. The room was filled with silence. Deep, respectful silence. Yuna stood as well, still holding the flowers. She closed her eyes and thought of her grandmother. She imagined Suri in her ship, flying toward the enemy fleet. She imagined the fear Suri must have felt. She imagined the love that was stronger than that fear. Grandmother, Yuna thought. They remember you now. The humans remember. After a long moment, Junho spoke again. Thank you all. Please, let us be seated. Everyone sat down. The atmosphere in the room had completely changed. The tension and hostility from yesterday were gone. In their place was something softer, something more respectful. The furry delegate cleared his throat. I did not know this history. My people were also saved during the Great Void War. I did not know it was the dragonkin who made that possible. Many species owe their survival to the dragonkin, said the quiet delegate who rarely spoke. We have all forgotten too much. The gray delegate lowered his forearms. Perhaps I have been too harsh in these negotiations. We are all connected in ways I did not understand. Yuna looked around the room with wonder. The same delegates who had been ready to fight yesterday were now speaking with humility and kindness. Junho's gesture had changed something. It had reminded everyone that they were not just representatives of competing interests. They were members of a shared galaxy, bound together by history and sacrifice. Junho met Yuna's eyes across the table. He gave her a small smile. "Shall we continue with the negotiations?" he asked gently. "I believe we may find more common ground today than we did yesterday." "I believe." Yuna nodded slowly. She placed the white star flowers on the table in front of her, where she could see them throughout the day. They would remind her of why she was here. They would give her strength. "Yes," she said, her voice clearer and stronger than before. "Let us continue." The negotiations resumed. But everything was different now. The delegates spoke to each other with patience. They listened to each other's concerns. They looked for solutions instead of victories. And throughout it all, Yuna sat tall in her grandmother's robe, with white starflowers glowing softly before her. For the first time since she arrived at the station, she did not feel alone. For the first time, she felt like her grandmother was proud of her. The negotiations lasted 3 more days. But they were nothing like the first day. Where there had been anger and suspicion, there was now cooperation and understanding. The delegates worked together to find solutions that helped everyone. They compromised. They listened. They remembered that they were all part of the same galaxy. On the final day, the trade agreement was signed by all 5 species. It was a historic document that would bring prosperity and peace to millions of beings across many worlds. And everyone agreed that the Dragonkin representative, young as she was, had played a key role in making it happen. Yuna stood by the window of the conference room, watching the other delegates celebrate. She held the white starflowers in her hands. They had stayed fresh throughout the negotiations, as if they too were waiting for this moment of victory. Junho walked up beside her. He looked tired but happy. "You did it," he said. "You led these negotiations to success. Your mother will be very proud." Yuna smiled softly. "I did not do it alone. Without your help, I would have failed on the first day." "You would have found your strength eventually," Junho replied. "I just helped you find it faster." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars outside. "Can I ask you something?" Yuna said quietly. "Of course. Why did you do it? Why did you spend your night researching my people's history? Why did you find the flowers and honor my grandmother in front of everyone?" Junho thought carefully before answering. "When I followed you to the observation deck and saw you crying, I knew something was wrong. I could not just ignore it. You were alone, carrying a heavy weight, and no one was helping you. That felt wrong to me. But you did not have to do all that research. You did not have to make that speech." Junho turned to look at her. His eyes were serious and sincere. "When I learned the truth about the Great Void War, I felt ashamed," he said. "Ashamed that humanity had forgotten such a great sacrifice. Ashamed that we had walked through this galaxy for 200 years without ever properly thanking the Dragonkin for saving us. You were standing right in front of me, the granddaughter of a hero who died for my people, and I had almost let the day of sacrifice pass without acknowledging it." Yuna felt her eyes grow wet again. Most people would not have cared. Most people would have focused on the negotiations and nothing else. "Then most people would be wrong," Junho said firmly. "Negotiations, trade, politics. These things are important. But they are not more important than honor. They are not more important than gratitude. They are not more important than remembering those who gave everything for us." Yuna reached out and touched Junho's hand gently. Her claws were cool against his warm skin. "Among my people," she said, "when someone honors a family's sacrifice with sincerity, a bond is created. That bond is considered sacred. It lasts beyond one lifetime. It connects 2 families forever." Junho looked at her with wonder. "What does that mean for us?" "It means that you are no longer just an ally of the Dragonkin," Yuna said. "You are family. My family. When I return home and tell my mother what you did, she will weep with gratitude. She will speak your name with respect for the rest of her days. And when I have children of my own someday, I will tell them about the human named Junho, who honored their great-grandmother." Junho felt his heart swell with emotion. He had only wanted to do the right thing. He had not expected this. "I do not deserve such honor," he said softly. "You deserve more than you know," Yuna replied. "Humans have a saying, I believe. Actions speak louder than words. Your actions spoke very loudly, Junho. They spoke across 200 years of silence. They were interrupted by the approach of another delegate. It was the furry being who had been so hostile on the first day. He walked up to them with his head bowed. "Delegate Yuna," he said in a humble voice. "Before I leave, I must apologize to you. I called you a child and treated you with disrespect. I was wrong. You have shown more wisdom and grace than delegates twice your age. I hope you can forgive me." Yuna nodded with kindness. "There is nothing to forgive. We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them." The furry delegate turned to Junho. "And you, human. What you did yesterday changed something in all of us. I have contacted my government and asked them to research the Dragonkin sacrifices during the Great Void War. If my people were also saved by their courage, we must acknowledge it properly." End quote. "That would be a wonderful tribute," Junho said. "Perhaps all the species who were saved can come together to create a proper memorial." "Yes," the furry delegate agreed. "That is an excellent idea. I will propose it to the Galactic Council." He bowed to both of them and walked away. Over the next hour, several other delegates approached Yuna and Junho to say similar things. The gray delegate admitted that his species had also benefited from Dragonkin protection during the war. The quiet delegate revealed that her home world had been completely saved by Dragonkin refugees who shared their technology. Everyone had a story. Everyone had a reason to be grateful. By the time the conference room was empty, Yuna felt different. She felt lighter. The weight she had been carrying since her grandmother's death was still there. But it was no longer crushing her. Others were helping her carry it now. She and Junho walked together to the station's departure area. Her transport ship was waiting to take her home. "I do not know when we will meet again," Yuna said. "But I hope it will be soon." "I hope so too," Junho replied. "Perhaps I can visit your home world someday. I would like to pay my respects at your grandmother's memorial site." Yuna's eyes widened with surprise and joy. "You would do that?" Of course. She saved my ancestors. The least I can do is honor her where she is remembered." Yuna reached into her robe and pulled out something small. It was a scale from her own body, shed naturally and polished to a bright shine. Among Dragonkin, giving someone a personal scale was a profound gesture of trust and connection. "Take this," she said, pressing it into Junho's hand. "It is a piece of me. Carry it always, and know that you have a family among the stars who will never forget you." Junho looked at the scale with reverence. It shimmered with golden and green colors, beautiful and strange. He closed his fingers around it carefully. "I will treasure it forever," he promised. They stood facing each other for a moment. Two beings from different worlds, connected by history and choice. Then Yuna stepped forward and embraced him. Her scales were cool against his skin, but the warmth of her heart was unmistakable. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for remembering." Junho hugged her back. "Thank you for letting me remember." When they separated, both had tears in their eyes. But they were not sad tears. They were tears of healing. Tears of hope. Yuna walked toward her transport ship. At the door, she turned back one last time. "Tell your people about us," she called out. "Tell them what we did. Tell them what we sacrificed. Not for glory, not for thanks, just so the truth is known." "I will," Junho promised. "I will tell everyone." Yuna smiled. It was the first real smile she had given since arriving at the station. Then she stepped into her ship, and the door closed behind her. Junho watched the ship lift off and disappear into the stars. He stayed at the window for a long time, holding the Dragonkin scale in his hand. When he finally turned away, he knew what he had to do. He would write about what he had learned. He would speak at conferences and councils. He would make sure that humanity never forgot the debt they owed to the Dragonkin, because that was what family did. They remembered. Across the galaxy, On her transport ship, Yuna opened a communication channel to her mother. When Hana's face appeared on the screen, weak but smiling, Yuna began to cry again. "Mother," she said, "I have so much to tell you. There is a human you need to know about. His name is Junho." And he remembered grandmother. Hana's eyes filled with tears. "He remembered?" "Yes," Yuna said. "He remembered everything. And he thanked us. In front of everyone, he thanked us." For a long moment, neither of them could speak. They simply cried together, mother and daughter, connected across the emptiness of space by love and memory. Finally, Hana spoke. "Then perhaps there is hope for this galaxy after all. If humans can remember, if they can honor the past, then perhaps we are not as alone as we thought." "We are not alone," Yuna agreed. "We never were." She looked out the window at the stars rushing past. Somewhere behind her, a human man was holding a piece of her close to his heart. Somewhere ahead, her mother was waiting for her with open arms, and somewhere in the fabric of the universe, she knew her grandmother was smiling. The day of sacrifice had passed, but its meaning would last forever, because now, humans remembered, and they would never forget again.